Thank you for joining the third installment of the AssistRx Patient Solutions Blueprint Product Lifecycle Action Plan and Assessment Strategies webinar. My name is Jan Nielsen, and I am the Division President of AssistRx Patient Solutions.
And my name is Kevin Robbins, and I'm a Vice President of Business Development at AssistRx.
In the first part of this three-part webinar series, we talked about the evolving needs of the providers and patients throughout the brand's life cycle and how the perfect combination of tech and talent can serve these populations. In the second installment, we discussed how to meet patients in their life flow and providers in their workflow, and how to measure program performance and empower your field teams with actionable insights. In today's webinar, we are going to expand upon how to evaluate your program service design, factors to consider if your patient solutions provider isn't meeting program SLAs, activity points, and best practices for a successful program transition. So Kevin, let's continue our discussion on implementing and evaluating service design.
Thanks, Jan. In our previous webinars, we talked about different service offerings, which service offerings made sense for your brand, and how to make sure that the services align with where the brand is in its life cycle. What we'd like to talk about now is beyond providing program metrics to your teams, the importance of aligning reporting and reporting mechanisms, both in terms of format and frequency, to the appropriate internal parties. While your field reimbursement team may need real-time data at their fingertips before they walk into offices and have timely discussions based on where their patients are in your patient service journey, your patient services and market access teams may prefer other methods of communication outside of real-time actionable data. They may need data presented to them that's more cumulative. It could be more summary charts. It could be presented to them more on a macro scale that has drill down capabilities that's presented in a dashboard format. The goal is to say that regardless of how we provide data to them, that's important to provide both the SLAs as well as data that aligns to their positions so that they understand the experiences that are being had by your patients and your providers. The goal is to present actionable insights and data to them so that they know what to do within each service department of your commercialization team so that they can impact those numbers and improve your provider and patient experience, as well as set expectations in the field for the types of services, both in terms of access points and delivery. So you want to understand why the numbers are the way they are and what you can do in the field to impact those.
One of the things I want to make sure that we clarify is that an SLA is a service level agreement. So it is what has been agreed upon as the time frame to complete a certain task or activity. So these are the things that maybe your current organization is failing. And you want to make sure as you move forward that your new vendor, new organization, new partner can meet those SLAs. So as this leads us to the next part of today's webinar, factors to consider when deciding whether to transition patient solution providers. Now, switching patient solution providers is a big decision, and it can be a very difficult lift for you and for your team. The first clear indicator that it's time to transition is not meeting SLA, so not meeting turnaround times, etc., or service level agreements. SLA should be what is a minimum threshold for delivery. The second factor is frequent change in your provider's organization and program leadership. Changes at the top can have a significant trickle-down effect on day-to-day operations. And changes in your program's main point of contact can also impact the program's efficiency, as the new contact will need time to learn you and your organization.
Another factor I see happen a lot is passing system upgrade costs onto the client. Vendors should be able to maintain high quality systems without footing the bill to someone else. And speaking of high quality, your patients and providers expect the same real-time available services they enjoy from other service providers. Disruptions in services due to system upgrades or bug fixes is just unacceptable and can leave a sour taste in your end user's mouth that may lead them to stop using your technology and go back to traditional methods. And on that note, you could have a problem even if your vendor isn't experiencing service disruptions, but is experiencing inefficiencies resulting from their legacy systems. The goal is to, if you introduce technologies, they should be efficiencies and increase the patient journey's access to therapies. You need a vendor with the technologies capable of facilitating that, or else you'll end up losing the competitive advantages that was the goal of your investment. The last factor is the ability to scale and evolve with your brand. They should be able to scale both up and down in the service offerings based on where your brand is in your life cycle. Your vendor should be able to automate service offerings, have efficiencies for their rollout process, and be able to strategize with you efficiently as your brand matures or new competitors come to the market. They should be able to focus staff, align with the brand decisions, and deliver both optimal experiences and differentiated services for your brand. Jan?
So let's say you've considered all these factors and you have decided it's time to switch. This leads us to transition best practices. Your goal during transition is to prevent any hiccups so that providers and patients don't lose faith in the program, so that your new vendor isn't burdened with playing catch up. As you look at transitioning, you need to think about what data you're going to bring across. In other words, what is worth leaving behind and what is worth bringing forward. Make sure you have the same definitions of terms among both vendors. So in other words, a glossary of definitions. Another consideration during transitions is patients in flight. You need to have a plan for those patients that have an in-office prescription or have a prescription going directly to the specialty pharmacy during this particular time frame. Do you have a method to crosswalk that data? Integration is another key component. Both sides need to be able to and have enough time to set up those integrations. Same thing for specialty pharmacies. Most specialty pharmacies have limited IT resources and assign integrations in a queue format. So they may not be able to get to that transition for up to 3 months, maybe even longer. You need to account for that in your timelines. You also need to think long-term and be mindful of when you plan to implement the transition. I've seen many organizations change hub vendors during year-end verification. That is not the time of year to move the data. You do not want to transition during periods where your patients and/or your providers' offices may need you most. If you don't have enough budget to build everything out at once, you should consider a phased approach. Have these services and this connectivity in your blueprint so that you can figure out when to roll them out. Show that you have some ROI from different services so that you can get internal buy-in that you need to continue to build out. Kevin?
Yeah, one thing that Jan and I'm sure our audience will agree on, is the most important part of any transition is continuity of care. You need to make sure that as you're designing your transition methodology, that you're putting the patient first, because there's patients that are already on your therapy, already using your product, and you want to make sure that it's a smooth transition for both them, but also your prescribers. You want to be able to proactively communicate to your prescribers that there is a change if you feel it's necessary and what it means. It needs to be more than that you're just transitioning vendors, but that you anticipate either improved KPIs and SLAs, maybe you're rolling out new services and new technologies as part of that, and what does that change mean to them, and how will it benefit them? They also have patients that they need to have concerns about. It's very important that those transparencies occur and is made evident to those that are going to be impacted for the worse or for the better, and it should always be for the better. Things like if there's going to be a new 1-800 number, if there's going to be new enrollment forms or documentation that you're going to roll out as part of this. All of that they need to understand, because you want them on your newer forms, on your upgraded technologies, or leveraging the appropriate numbers to quickly gain access to your new vendor. These are just a few items to keep in mind to ensure continuity for both your prescribers and your patients. Transitions can be a big lift, but you don't want to make it bigger than it needs to be by not planning appropriately or surprising your patient and prescriber demographic. So what if you need to transition multiple brands from one vendor to another? Jan, can you explain how that could change your implementation strategy?
Great. Thanks, Kevin. That was a real easy one for me to take on. All right. So let's say you do have brands that are already commercialized in the market and have different provider and patient and caregiver populations. This is an opportunity for you to step back and determine whether you can have similar business rules across those particular drugs. Maybe they're in the same disease state, for example. Maybe the copay rules could be the same across all your programs. In that case, you have an opportunity to put them in the same CRM instance, same platform. This will allow you to save dollars and possibly reduce the number of FTEs in your program by one, putting consolidation in place, as well as looking to put automation in place. The other opportunity is front end. Intake roles. You can implement more centralized FTEs who take incoming calls and triage them to specialized teams where applicable. This creates a franchise service organization across multiple products, and it could create even greater efficiencies across your portfolio.
Great insight, Jan. Thank you again for attending part 3 of the AssistRx Patient Solutions Blueprint, Product Lifecycle, Action Plan and Assessment Strategies webinar. We hope you learned helpful insights and best practices for tailoring your patient support program, measuring program performance, and transitioning to a new patient solutions vendor. While this concludes our Patient Solutions Blueprint webinar series, we encourage you to keep the conversation going with us through our social media channels or by contacting us at AssistRx.com.
Thank you, Kevin. We also encourage you to check back for new webinars and other industry insights and best practices written and presented by AssistRx leadership.